A lonely billionaire walks out to his gate one stormy night and freezes. There, tied to the iron bars, is an obese teenage girl, soaked, shaking, and covered in red paint that screams, "Too fat to marry!" He thinks it's a cruel prank. But when he cuts her free, she whispers through tears, "Please don't call the police. They'll send me back." In that moment, two broken souls, one hiding from the world, the other thrown away by it, collide in a way that will change both their lives forever. But what he doesn't know is that saving her will ignite a firestorm of lies, judgment, and headlines that could destroy them both. Why was she left there? Who would do something so cruel? And when the world turns against them, will one man's compassion be enough to save them both? Or will it cost him everything? Sometimes the gate you open changes your whole life. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thunder crackled across the Georgia sky, each bolt illuminating the vast marble halls of Kai Ford's mansion like camera flashes in the darkness. The sound of rain drumming against tall windows filled the empty spaces between lightning strikes, creating a lonely symphony that matched his mood. Kai's fingers hovered over the piano keys, remembering how his daughter's small hands once danced across them with such joy. The melody he played was hers, a simple tune she had mastered for her final recital. Now it haunted these halls like a ghost, the notes bittersweet with memory. The security system's sudden beep jolted him from his reverie. A red light flashed on the monitoring panel. Movement at the front gate. Kai frowned, pushing back from the piano. No one ever came here, especially not during a storm like this. He crossed to the security monitor, his footsteps echoing against marble floors. What he saw made his heart stop. There, illuminated by security lights and drenched by pouring rain, was a teenage girl. She wasn't just standing at his gate, she was tied to it, her wrists bound to the iron bars with what looked like zip ties. "Dear God," he whispered, already moving. He grabbed his coat from the hall closet, not bothering to button it as he rushed through his front door into the downpour. The rain was cold and fierce, soaking through his clothes in seconds. As he got closer, he could see cruel red letters painted across the girl's dark hoodie. "Too fat to marry." His stomach turned at the vicious message. The girl's head was down, her wet hair hiding her face. She was shivering violently, whether from cold or fear or both. As his footsteps splashed through puddles, she looked up with terrified eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I'm so sorry. Please don't hurt me." "I'm not going to hurt you," Kai said firmly, keeping his voice gentle despite his beating heart. He pulled out his pocket knife and carefully cut through the zip ties binding her wrists. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me your name?" She rubbed her freed wrists, still trembling. "To Tanisha Brooks, but everyone calls me Tanny." "Tanny," he repeated softly. "I'm Kai Ford. We need to call the police and report whoever did this to you." "No." The word burst from her with such panic that Kai stepped back. "Please, no police, please! I can't, they'll make everything worse. They always do." Kai studied her face in the security lights. She couldn't be more than 16, and despite her size, she seemed to be trying to make herself as small as possible. Her dark skin was pale with cold, her lips taking on a bluish tinge. "You're freezing," he said. "At least come inside and warm up. We can talk about what to do next when you're dry." Tanny hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Another crack of thunder made her jump, and she wrapped her arms around herself. "I promise you're safe here," Kai added quietly. "Just come get warm by the fire." After a long moment, she nodded. Kai guided her through his front gates and up the winding driveway to his house, trying to shield her from the worst of the rain with his coat. Inside, the marble foyer felt cavernous around them, their wet footsteps echoing off the high ceiling. Kai led her to the great room where a gas fireplace cast warm light across plush furniture. "Wait here," he said. "I'll get you some towels and something dry to wear." When he returned with an armful of fluffy towels and a clean sweatshirt from his closet, Tanny was standing exactly where he'd left her, water pooling around her feet on the hardwood floor. She took the towels with shaking hands. "There's a bathroom just down that hall where you can change," he said, pointing. "I'll make some hot chocolate while you get dried off." Tanny's eyes widened slightly at the kindness in his voice, as if she wasn't used to being treated gently. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the towels to her chest as she hurried to the bathroom. In the kitchen, Kai's hands shook slightly as he prepared 2 mugs of hot chocolate. The sound of rain against windows followed him, but now it felt different, less lonely, more ominous. Who would do something so cruel to a young girl? And why was she so terrified of involving the police? When Tanny emerged from the bathroom, she looked smaller somehow, swimming in his oversized sweatshirt. She'd pulled her damp hair back from her face, revealing features that were pretty despite being marked by fear and exhaustion. She perched nervously on the edge of an armchair near the fire, accepting the mug of hot chocolate with both hands. "Thank you, Mr. Ford," she said quietly, staring down into the steaming liquid. "I'm really sorry about all this. I never meant to bother anyone. They just—" Her voice caught, and she took a shaky breath. "You're not bothering anyone," Kai assured her, settling into a chair across from her. "And you don't have to explain anything until you're ready." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage outside while the fire crackled softly. Kai noticed how Tanny's shoulders gradually began to relax as warmth seeped back into her body. The terror in her eyes slowly gave way to exhaustion. Looking at her, Kai felt something crack in his carefully maintained shell of isolation. For years, he'd kept the world at bay, refusing to let anyone close enough to matter. But seeing this young girl, hurt, afraid, yet somehow still holding on to dignity, awakened something he'd thought long dead. The desire to help, to protect, to care. The storm outside mirrored the one in his soul, chaotic, powerful, and threatening to wash away the carefully constructed walls he'd built around his heart. As lightning flashed across the sky, Kai realized with startling clarity that his life of comfortable numbness had just been irrevocably disrupted. "Would you like to talk about what happened?" he asked gently after she'd had time to warm up. Tanny's fingers tightened around her mug. "It was just some kids from school," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been cruel before, but never like this. They followed me after art club, and I tried to run, but—" She swallowed hard. "They caught me, tied me up, wrote those awful words." Her voice broke, and she quickly wiped away a tear. Kai felt anger surge through him, not the cold, distant kind he was used to, but something hot and protective. "These people need to be held accountable," he said firmly. "What they did was assault. It's a crime." "Please," Tanny said, looking up at him with pleading eyes. "If I report them, it'll just get worse. Their parents are important people in town. Nobody ever believes me anyway. They just say I'm being too sensitive, that I need to learn to take a joke." She let out a bitter laugh, as if humiliating someone like this could ever be funny. The way she said it, with such resigned acceptance, made Kai's heart ache. He recognized that tone, the sound of someone who had learned to expect cruelty from the world. He'd heard it in his own voice often enough. "You deserve better than that," he said quietly. "No one has the right to hurt you, no matter who their parents are. Tanny looked at him with surprise, as if the concept of deserving better had never occurred to her. The simple truth of his words seemed to reach something deep inside her, and fresh tears welled in her eyes. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the Georgia night, but inside, something was changing. In the warm light of the fire, two wounded souls began to recognize themselves in each other, the lonely billionaire and the hurting young girl, both carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone. The piano melody that had earlier filled the house with memories of loss now seemed to take on a different quality, less like a ghost of the past and more like a bridge to something new. As Kai watched Tanny slowly relax into the warmth and safety of his home, he felt the first stirrings of purpose he'd experienced in years. The storm raged on, but its power to threaten had diminished. Within these walls, a different kind of weather was brewing, one of healing, of connection, of possibility. Though neither of them knew it yet, this night would mark the beginning of a journey that would change them both forever. Inside the vast mansion, Tanny perched on the edge of an expensive leather armchair, looking impossibly small despite her size. The plush blanket Kai had given her was wrapped tightly around her shoulders like armor. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the crystal chandelier, the antique vases, and the gleaming grand piano, each item probably worth more than everything her family owned. The leather squeaked as she shifted uncomfortably, trying to make herself smaller. Water from her damp clothes had started to seep into the expensive fabric beneath her. "I'm sorry about your chair," she whispered, horrified at the thought of ruining something so costly. Kai waved away her concern. "It's just furniture," he said, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "You're more important than things." The words came out automatically, surprising him. They sounded like something his late wife would have said. He cleared his throat. "Would you like some soup? I can heat some up." Tanny's stomach answered before she could, letting out an embarrassingly loud growl. Her cheeks flushed red. "Yes, please," she mumbled. "If it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all." Kai headed to the kitchen, grateful for something practical to do. The familiar motions of heating soup gave him time to process the surreal turn his evening had taken. Just hours ago, he'd been alone at his piano, letting memories wash over him. Now he had a traumatized teenager in his living room. When he returned with a steaming bowl of tomato soup and some crackers, Tanny's eyes went wide with hunger. She accepted the bowl with trembling hands. "When was the last time you ate?" Kai asked, settling into a chair across from her. Tanny spooned the soup carefully, trying not to spill. "Yesterday morning," she admitted quietly. Before I left home." Kai noticed how she tensed at the mention of home, how her spoon paused mid-air for just a moment before she continued eating. "Did you run away?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral, non-judgmental. She nodded slightly but didn't elaborate. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clink of spoon against bowl and the distant rumble of thunder. "You don't have to tell me why," Kai said finally. "But if you're in any kind of danger, I need to know." "It's not like that," Tanny said quickly. "Nobody's hurting me at home, it's just—" She stared down into her soup, searching for words. "Sometimes things get too hard to face. Sometimes you just need to disappear for a while." Her voice grew smaller with each word. Kai understood that feeling all too well. Hadn't he essentially disappeared from the world after losing his family? His mansion was just a more comfortable form of running away. "You can stay here tonight," he found himself saying. "Just for the night." He added quickly, "We can figure things out in the morning." Relief flooded Tanny's face, followed quickly by guilt. "Thank you, Mr. Ford. I promise I won't be any trouble." After she finished eating, Kai led her upstairs to one of the guest rooms. The house had 12 bedrooms, all perfectly maintained but rarely used. This one, decorated in soft blues and creams, felt the least imposing. "The bathroom's through there," he explained, pointing to a door. "There should be new toothbrushes and everything you need in the cabinets. And—" He hesitated, then went to the walk-in closet. After some searching, he emerged with a soft cotton nightgown. "This might be big enough. It belonged to my wife." Tanny accepted the nightgown reverently, running her fingers over the fabric. "She must have been beautiful," she said softly. "She was," Kai agreed, his throat tightening. "Inside and out." He quickly changed the subject. "I'll be down the hall if you need anything. Try to get some rest." Before heading to his own room, Kai made a detour to his study. Old habits died hard. He carefully locked the door, securing away the computers and sensitive documents inside. It wasn't that he didn't trust Tanny, exactly, but trust was a muscle he hadn't exercised in years. In his bedroom, Kai went through his nightly routine mechanically, his mind churning. On his nightstand, a silver frame held a photo of Sarah and Emma, his wife and daughter, forever frozen in a moment of laughter at the beach. Emma's dark curls were whipping in the wind, so like her mother's. They'd been gone for 5 years now, but sometimes the loss felt as fresh as yesterday. Picking up the frame, Kai traced their faces with his finger. "What am I doing?" he whispered to their smiling images. "Letting a stranger stay here. I must be losing my mind." But he could almost hear Sarah's response. "You're doing the right thing, love. That girl needs help." Still, guilt gnawed at him. Was he betraying their memory by letting someone else into this space? Or was he betraying their values by hesitating to help someone in need? Down the hall, Tanny knelt beside the enormous bed, her hands clasped tight. The nightgown was soft against her skin, carrying a faint trace of lavender. "Dear God," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing me somewhere warm tonight. Thank you for Mr. Ford's kindness. Please help me figure out what to do next, and please—" Her voice caught. "Please help Mum understand why I had to leave." She climbed into bed, sinking into the cloud-like mattress. The rain had settled into a gentle patter against the windows, no longer threatening. In this strange room, surrounded by luxury she'd never known, Tanny felt safer than she had in months. The storm that had brought them together was fading now, its fury spent. But it had left something in its wake, a tentative connection between two wounded souls who recognized in each other a familiar pain. Neither Kai nor Tanny slept deeply that night, both too aware of the other's presence in the house, both wondering what the morning would bring. Kai drifted off, watching shadows dance across his ceiling, his thoughts alternating between memories of his family and concern for the girl down the hall. Tanny curled into a tight ball beneath the expensive sheets, trying not to think about tomorrow, focusing instead on the blessed warmth and safety of the present moment. Between them, something fragile was taking root, not quite trust, not yet understanding, but a recognition. Two broken hearts beating under one roof, each carrying their own storms, each desperately needing what the other could provide. Purpose and hope. Morning light streamed through the tall windows of Kai Ford's mansion, casting long golden rays across the marble floors. In the kitchen, Kai stood at the professional-grade stove, something he hadn't done in years. The rhythmic sizzle of bacon filled the air as he methodically prepared breakfast: scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and toast. Simple food, but it felt strange to be cooking for someone else after so long. He'd woken early, his normal routine disturbed by the knowledge of another presence in his house. Before heading downstairs, he'd left a neatly folded stack of clothes outside Tanny's door, one of his old button-down shirts and some drawstring pants that might work as temporary clothing. The coffee maker hummed, brewing his usual morning blend. Kai found himself adding extra cups of water, another small adjustment to accommodate his unexpected guest. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to the last time he'd cooked breakfast for someone else. It had been Emma's 16th birthday. She'd requested chocolate chip pancakes, and Sarah had. He shook his head, forcing himself back to the present. The eggs were starting to brown at the edges. Soft footsteps in the doorway made him turn. Tanny stood there hesitantly, swimming in his oversized white shirt. She'd rolled up the sleeves several times, and the hem hung almost to her knees. Her dark hair was damp from the shower, and she looked younger in the morning light, more vulnerable. "Good morning," Kai said, trying to keep his voice gentle. "I hope you slept okay." "Yes, sir, thank you." Tanny shifted her weight from foot to foot. "The shirt. I hope it's okay that I'm wearing it." "Of course. That's why I left it there." He gestured to the kitchen island, where he'd already set out plates and silverware. "Breakfast is almost ready. Please sit." Tanny perched carefully on one of the high stools, her movements cautious as if afraid of taking up too much space. Kai placed a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, toast, and some fresh fruit he'd found in the fridge. "Would you like some orange juice? Or I have coffee, tea?" "Orange juice would be nice," she said softly. "Thank you, Mr. Ford." He poured them both a glass and sat down across from her with his own plate. For a few minutes they ate in silence. Kai noticed how Tanny took small, careful bites, as if afraid to appear too eager despite her obvious hunger. "This is really good," she ventured finally. "I usually just grab a granola bar for breakfast. When I eat breakfast," she added quietly. Kai looked up from his plate. "When was the last time you had a proper meal, Tanny?" She pushed some eggs around with her fork. "Before yesterday's soup. Maybe 2 days ago. Things at home have been—" She trailed off, then reached for her backpack beside the stool. After some rummaging, she pulled out a sketchbook. "Can I show you something?" When Kai nodded, she opened the book. Page after page revealed detailed pencil drawings, landscapes, animals, and particularly faces. They were remarkably good, showing both technical skill and emotional depth. "These are excellent," Kai said, genuinely impressed. "You're very talented." A small smile touched Tanny's lips, the first he'd seen. "Art is the only thing I'm good at. At least that's what everyone says, that I'm useless at everything else." Her smile faded. Too fat to be a cheerleader, too stupid to be in advanced classes, too ugly to ever get a boyfriend. Kai's hands tightened on his coffee cup. "Who says these things to you?" "Everyone. Kids at school mostly, but—" She swallowed hard. "Mum's boyfriend says stuff too. Worse stuff." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "That's why I had to leave. He's been getting meaner. And Mum won't listen. She says I'm making things up for attention." The protective anger that flared in Kai's chest surprised him with its intensity. "We should call child services," he said firmly. "This isn't a situation you should have to handle alone." "No!" Tanny's voice rose in panic. "Please, Mr. Ford. They'll just send me back. Mum will convince them everything's fine. She always does. And then it'll be worse than before." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, I can't go back there." Kai studied her face. The fear in her eyes was real, and unfortunately, he knew enough about the system to know her concerns weren't unfounded. After a long moment, he sighed. "All right, you can stay here for a few days while we figure something out. But we will need to find a proper solution, Tanny. You can't run forever." Relief flooded her features. Thank you, she breathed. I promise I won't be any trouble. After breakfast, as Tanny helped him clear the dishes despite his protests, Kai made a decision. There's something I'd like to show you, he said. Follow me. He led her upstairs to a door he hadn't opened in years. His hand trembled slightly on the knob before he pushed it open. Sunlight poured through the large windows of what had clearly been an art studio. Easels stood draped in white cloths, and shelves lined with supplies stretched along one wall. Everything was exactly as it had been 5 years ago, preserved like a museum exhibit. Tanny stepped inside slowly, her eyes wide. This was Emma's studio. Kai finished quietly. My daughter's. She loved to paint. He watched as Tanny moved carefully through the room, taking in the space with reverent attention. She must have been happy here, Tanny said softly, running her fingers lightly along an easel. The comment struck something deep in Kai's chest, a bittersweet memory of Emma's laughter as she worked on her art, of the joy that had once filled this room. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt his lips curve into a small smile. Yes, he said. She was. After showing Tanny the studio, Kai hesitated by the doorway. Feel free to use anything here. The supplies are still good. He watched as she walked around, touching brushes and examining half-finished canvases with gentle fingers. Are you sure? Tanny asked, her voice filled with awe. Everything looks so expensive. Art supplies should be used, not preserved. Kai said softly. Emma would have wanted that. Once Kai left for his home office, Tanny settled at one of the easels. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, warming her shoulders as she flipped through her sketchbook to find a fresh page. Her eyes kept drifting to a silver-framed photograph on a nearby shelf. It showed a younger Kai with his arms around a beautiful woman and a teenage girl who shared his gentle eyes. They were all laughing at something off-camera, their joy frozen in time. Taking out her pencils, Tanny began to sketch. The familiar motion of pencil on paper calmed her racing thoughts. She lost herself in the details, the curve of the mother's smile, the daughter's dimples, the way Kai's eyes crinkled at the corners when he truly smiled. Hour after hour passed as she worked, adding shadows and highlights, trying to capture not just their faces, but the happiness that radiated from the photograph. The sun had moved across the sky when she heard footsteps behind her. Kai stood in the doorway, a cup of tea in his hand. He started to speak, then stopped abruptly when he saw what she was drawing. I hope it's okay, Tanny said quickly. I saw the photo and they just looked so happy. I wanted to try capturing that. Kai moved closer, his hands trembling slightly as he set down the tea. The portrait was striking in its accuracy. Every detail perfect. But more than that, she had somehow captured the essence of that moment. The love between them practically glowed on the page. Sarah, he whispered, touching the drawing of his wife's face. And Emma. His voice cracked on his daughter's name. It was raining, he said suddenly, the words spilling out as if they had been trapped for years. They were coming home from Emma's art show. A drunk driver ran a red light. I was supposed to be with them, but I had a meeting. He drew in a shaky breath. I always had meetings. Tanny set down her pencil and looked up at him, her eyes full of compassion. I'm so sorry, she said softly. They were beautiful. Yes, Kai agreed, his voice trembling. Thank you for bringing them back like this, for seeing them as they were. The rest of the day passed quietly. Kai retreated to his office while Tanny continued sketching, though she could hear him pacing occasionally. When evening came, they shared a simple dinner of pasta that Kai prepared. As they cleaned up afterward, Tanny noticed how the sound of their dishes echoed in the vast kitchen. The whole house seemed to amplify its own emptiness. "Mr. Ford," she said carefully as she dried a plate, "do you ever laugh anymore?" Kai's hands stilled in the soapy water. "I keep busy with work," he said, not meeting her eyes. "The company needs constant attention." "But that's not what I asked." Tanny set down her towel. "Laughter is important. It heals things inside us that medicine can't reach." "You sound very wise for 16, Kai said, trying to deflect. "I read a lot of self-help books," she admitted with a small smile. "When you're alone a lot, you try to figure things out yourself." After they finished the dishes, Tanny excused herself to get ready for bed. But before she left the kitchen, she pulled out her sketchbook and quickly drew something on a fresh page. She tore it out carefully and left it propped against the coffee maker where Kai would be sure to find it in the morning. Long after midnight, unable to sleep, Kai came down for his usual late-night coffee. He found the drawing waiting for him, a simple sketch of himself smiling, the kind of full, genuine smile he used to have in old photographs. Below it, Tanny had written in her neat handwriting, "Try this sometime." Looking at the drawing, something unexpected happened. A small chuckle escaped him, rusty from disuse but real. The sound surprised him so much that he laughed again, the sound echoing in the quiet kitchen. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed, really laughed, but here he was, at 2 o'clock in the morning, laughing at a teenager's drawing. He carefully folded the sketch and put it in his pocket, feeling something shift inside him. It was small and fragile, like a seedling pushing through frozen ground. But it was there, a reminder that he was still human, still capable of joy, even after all this time. The sensation was terrifying and wonderful all at once. As he made his coffee, he found himself glancing at the drawing again, touching the corner of it in his pocket as if to make sure it was real. The girl sleeping upstairs had somehow seen past his carefully constructed walls and offered him something he had forgotten he needed: permission to feel again. The morning sun cast long shadows through the dining room windows as Kai prepared a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. He noticed Tanny hadn't touched her food, her attention fixed on something outside. Following her gaze, he saw she was staring at the iron gates where he'd found her just days ago. "The words are still there," she said quietly, her fork pushing eggs around the plate. "I can see them from here." Kai set down his coffee cup. The cruel red letters were indeed still visible, though faded from the rain. He'd meant to have someone take care of it, but in the whirlwind of the past few days, it had slipped his mind. "I could paint over them," Tanny offered hesitantly. If that's okay. I just hate seeing them there. It's like they're shouting at me every time I look out." Kai studied her face, the mix of shame and determination in her expression. After a long moment, he stood up. "Wait here." He disappeared into the garage, returning a few minutes later with 2 cans of black paint, brushes, and some old towels. "We'll need to clean the surface first," he said, setting everything on the kitchen counter. "The paint won't stick properly otherwise." Tanny's face lit up. "We?" "Well, I can't let you do all the work," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching upward. "Besides, I haven't painted anything since Emma and I decorated her room years ago. It might be nice." They gathered their supplies and headed out to the gate. The morning was warm, with a gentle breeze that rustled the magnolia trees lining the driveway. Tanny rolled up her sleeves, determination replacing the sadness in her eyes. "First we scrub," Kai instructed, handing her a brush and some soapy water. They worked side by side, attacking the hateful words with steady strokes. As they cleaned, Tanny began humming softly, a tune Kai didn't recognize but found oddly comforting. "You know," she said between scrubs. "My art teacher always says mistakes are just opportunities for something better. Maybe these gates need their own fresh start, too." Kai nodded, understanding she wasn't just talking about the gates. When the surface was clean and dry, they opened the paint cans. The rich smell of fresh paint filled the air as they dipped their brushes. "Ready?" Kai asked. "Ready," Tanny confirmed. They started painting, careful at first, trying to stay neat. But then Tanny's brush slipped, sending a splash of black paint across Kai's expensive shirt. She froze, horror-struck, until she saw his expression. Instead of anger, Kai looked down at his ruined shirt and started chuckling. Then, with deliberate precision, he flicked his brush, leaving a streak of paint across Tanny's arm. "Hey!" she squealed, laughing. "That's not fair." Their painting became less precise after that, punctuated by laughter and playful paint splatters. Neither noticed Mrs. Henderson, the neighbor from across the street, watching with interest from her garden. She pulled out her phone, snapping several photos of the unlikely pair, the usually stoic billionaire and the young girl, both covered in paint and actually smiling. "What do you suppose that's about?" Mrs. Henderson murmured to herself, uploading one of the photos to her social media account. She added the caption, "Billionaire with strange girl at gate. What's going on at the Ford mansion?" and hit post. By late afternoon, the gate was completely transformed. The cruel words were gone, buried under fresh paint that gleamed in the sunlight. Kai and Tanny stood back to admire their work, both splattered with black paint but looking satisfied. "Much better," Tanny declared, wiping her hands on a towel. "Agreed," Kai said, surprising himself by meaning it. The activity had been oddly therapeutic, like washing away more than just paint. They were heading back inside when Maria, Kai's housekeeper of 15 years, met them at the door with a worried expression. "Mr. Ford," she said in a low voice, "I think you should see this." She held out her tablet, showing him Mrs. Henderson's post. It had already been shared hundreds of times, with speculation running wild in the comments. "Who is she?" "Secret daughter. Crisis PR stunt. Didn't know Ford had kids." Maria cleared her throat. "The local news stations have been calling, and I've seen 2 tabloid reporters asking questions in the neighborhood." Kai's jaw tightened. He'd grown used to privacy in recent years, had carefully cultivated it. Now he could feel it slipping away, threatening the fragile peace he and Tanny had found. "It's fine," he said firmly, though his expression suggested otherwise. "Let them talk. It doesn't matter." But as evening fell, a car parked just outside the gate. Through the security cameras, Kai could see the driver, a woman with a professional camera settling in for a long wait. She wasn't the first reporter he'd dealt with, but this felt different. This time, he wasn't just protecting himself. In the kitchen, Tanny was helping Maria prepare dinner, telling animated stories about her favorite artists while chopping vegetables. She seemed lighter after their painting project, more at ease. Kai watched them from the doorway, realizing with sudden clarity that he'd grown protective of this peace they'd found. The world was indeed intruding again, but this time he had more than just himself to consider. The reporter's car remained outside as night fell, its presence a reminder that their small sanctuary was no longer secret. Tomorrow would bring questions, speculation, and the harsh glare of public scrutiny. But for now, Kai chose to focus on the sound of Tanny's laughter, mixing with the dinner preparations and the lingering satisfaction of their day's work at the gate. The paint-splattered shirt he wore would normally have been immediately discarded. Instead, he carefully hung it up, a reminder that sometimes the best moments come from unexpected messes. On his security monitor, the reporter's car kept its silent vigil, but inside the mansion, the warmth of shared laughter and honest work had created something the outside world couldn't touch, At least, not yet. The morning sun had barely risen when Kai's phone started buzzing incessantly. Maria rushed into his study, her usually composed demeanor clearly shaken. "Mr. Ford, you need to see this," she said, holding out her tablet. The headline screamed across the screen. "Lonely billionaire keeps teen girl in mansion." Below it was the photo from yesterday, now spread across multiple news sites and social media platforms. The innocent moment of painting the gate had been twisted into something sinister. Kai's stomach clenched as he scrolled through the comments. Wild speculation about Tanny's identity and his intentions filled every thread. Some suggested she was his secret daughter. Others proposed far darker theories. The word kidnapping appeared more times than he could count. A commotion outside drew him to the window. At least a dozen news vans had gathered beyond his gate, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal trees. Reporters clutched microphones and cameras, their faces eager for a story. "Where's Tanny?" he asked Maria. "In her room. She saw the news on her phone." Kai found Tanny huddled in the corner of the guest room, her tablet lying face down on the bed. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hands trembling as she hugged her knees to her chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered as soon as she saw him. "This is all my fault. They think you did something wrong because of me." Kai sat down on the edge of the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. "None of this is your fault, Tanny. The media always wants a scandal, even where there isn't one." "But what if they call the police? What if they make me go back?" Her voice cracked with fear. "I won't let that happen," Kai said firmly. "I'm calling my lawyer right now. We're going to handle this the right way." Back in his study, Kai dialed James Morton, his attorney of 20 years. James answered on the first ring. "I've seen the news," James said without preamble. "This is serious, Kai. You need to make a statement before this spins completely out of control." "I know." Kai rubbed his temples. "But I want to tell the truth. She's a runaway I found tied to my gate. I couldn't just leave her there." "Are you sure that's wise? It could complicate things legally." "I'm not lying, James. Schedule a press conference. Today." The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Maria helped Tanny find suitable clothes while Kai worked with James on his statement. Outside, the crowd of reporters had grown, their cameras trained on every window of the mansion. By early afternoon, Kai stood before a podium in his front garden, facing a sea of microphones and flashing cameras. Tanny watched from inside, her heart pounding as he began to speak. "3 nights ago, during a storm, I found a teenage girl tied to my gate," Kai said, his voice steady despite the tension in his shoulders. "She was a victim of cruel bullying and had run away from an unsafe home situation. As a human being, I couldn't turn her away. Everything else you've heard is speculation and lies." The reporters erupted with questions, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of demands for more details. Kai maintained his composure, answering what he could while protecting Tanny's privacy. But the story wouldn't die. Throughout the day, new headlines appeared. "Ford Mansion Mystery. What's the real story?" "Teen's identity still unknown. What's Billionaire hiding?" "Sources question Ford's account of gate incident." That evening, Tanny crept down the hallway toward Kai's study, intending to apologize again. She stopped short when she heard his voice through the partially open door. He was on the phone, sounding tired and frustrated. "I just wanted to help someone," she heard him say quietly. "After Sarah and Emma, I thought maybe I could do one good thing. But now—" His voice trailed off. Tanny's heart ached. She'd seen the pain in his eyes whenever he mentioned his wife and daughter, but hearing the raw emotion in his voice now made it even more real. He'd taken a chance on helping her, and it had brought nothing but trouble. She retreated to the art studio, pulling out her sketchbook and pencils. For hours she worked on a new drawing, putting all her skill and heart into every line. When she finished, she studied it carefully. A young girl at a piano, her face bright with joy, her fingers dancing across the keys. She'd based it on the photo she'd seen of Emma, but she'd drawn her in motion, alive with music. Quietly, she slipped into Kai's study while he was speaking with James in the kitchen. She placed the drawing on his desk and hurried out. It was past midnight when Kai finally returned to his study. The day's chaos had left him exhausted, but there was still work to be done. Then he saw the drawing. His hands trembled as he picked it up. Emma, his Emma, captured in a moment of pure happiness. The way her head tilted when she played, the slight curve of her smile, the familiar way her hair fell across her forehead. Tanny had somehow captured it all. The tears came silently at first, then in waves he couldn't control. He sank into his chair, holding the drawing close, letting himself remember the sound of Emma's music filling these halls. For so long, he'd kept those memories locked away, afraid of the pain they brought. But now, through Tanny's art, they felt like a gift rather than a wound. Outside, the reporters maintained their vigil, their cameras still hoping to catch a glimpse of scandal. But inside the mansion, two broken souls were beginning to heal each other, one small kindness at a time. Kai carefully placed the drawing in a frame that had stood empty on his desk for years. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more questions, more suspicion. But for now, he let himself be grateful for the unexpected way Grace had appeared at his gate that stormy night. Looking at Emma's drawn face, so full of life, he whispered, "Thank you, Tanny." The morning after the press conference, Kai made a decision. Walking into the kitchen where Tanny sat, nervously watching the news coverage, he turned off the television with firm resolve. "You're staying inside until this dies down," he said, his voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. "We'll make the best of it." Tanny's shoulders relaxed visibly. You're not sending me away?" "No," Kai replied, starting to prepare their breakfast. "We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, they fell into comfortable routines. Each morning began with breakfast, Kai discovering he enjoyed cooking for someone again. They'd share fresh fruit, whole grain toast, and sometimes pancakes when Tanny's eyes lit up at the suggestion. The kitchen, once cold and unused, filled with warm aromas and quiet conversation. After breakfast, they'd move to the art studio. Kai had ordered new supplies, professional-grade pencils, markers, and a top-of-the-line digital tablet. Watching Tanny explore these tools reminded him of Emma's excitement over new art materials. "I've never had anything this nice," Tanny admitted one morning, carefully holding the tablet pen. "Mom always said art supplies were a waste of money for someone like me." Kai looked up from his laptop. "Someone like you?" Tanny's fingers traced invisible patterns on the table. "You know, fat girls don't get to be artists," that's what she'd say. Said I should focus on losing weight instead of drawing stupid pictures. The bitterness in her voice made Kai's heart ache. Setting aside his work, he pulled up a chair beside her. "Tell me more," he said softly. "If you want to." And slowly, over cups of hot chocolate and gentle encouragement, Tanny's story emerged. Her mother's constant criticism about her weight since childhood. The boyfriend, Roger, who'd seemed nice at first but joined in the taunting. The final humiliation that drove her to run away. Roger and his friends tying her to Kai's gate as a cruel prank, painting those horrible words on her clothes. "Mom just laughed when I called her," Tanny whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Said maybe it would teach me a lesson about being so fat." Kai handed her a tissue, fighting back his own anger at the cruelty she'd endured. "Your mother was wrong," he said firmly, Your size has nothing to do with your worth or your talent." To distract her, he began teaching her digital art techniques. Her first attempts were awkward, lines wobbling, colors clashing. But instead of frustration, they found themselves laughing at her more spectacular mistakes. "I made your nose look like a potato." She giggled, showing him her attempt at his portrait. "I think you've captured my essence perfectly." He replied with mock seriousness, making her laugh harder. These moments of joy became more frequent as days passed. Their evenings settled into comfortable patterns, shared meals, long talks about art and life, sometimes just quiet companionship as they both worked on their respective projects. One night, after dinner, Tanny asked about the piano in the living room. "Do you play?" "Not anymore," Kai answered, his eyes distant. "Emma did. She was wonderful at it." "Tell me about her?" Tanny asked softly. Kai was quiet for so long that Tanny thought he wouldn't answer. Then he began speaking, his voice low and fond. "She was sunshine in human form, always laughing, always creating something. The house was never quiet when she was here. Music, singing, the sound of her running through the halls." They moved to the living room, settling on the comfortable couch with cups of chamomile tea. The media circus outside had begun to fade, though a few persistent reporters still maintained their vigil at the gate. "She would have liked you," Kai continued, looking at Tanny with gentle eyes. "You remind me of her sometimes, the way you see beauty in everything, how you use art to express what words can't say." Tanny cradled her teacup, warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot drink. "Maybe," she said softly. "She sent me here, like a gift from heaven or something." She blushed, worried it might sound silly. But Kai just smiled, his eyes suspiciously bright. Maybe she did. Looking around the grand room, Tanny realized how different it felt now compared to that first stormy night. The marble floors and expensive furniture no longer seemed cold and intimidating. Somewhere between shared breakfasts and art lessons, laughter and tears, the mansion had transformed. The silence that fell between them was comfortable, filled with understanding. Through the windows, they could see the last of the news vans pulling away from the gate. But neither paid much attention to that now. Inside these walls, they'd found something more important than headlines. They'd found healing, purpose, and a sense of family neither had expected. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9 o'clock, its deep tones echoing through the house. But unlike the hollow echoes of Kai's years of solitude, the sound now seemed to resonate with life and warmth. The mansion wasn't just a house anymore, it was becoming a home. "Thank you," Tanny said suddenly, "for everything." Kai reached over and squeezed her hand gently. No words were needed. They both understood what had changed. In trying to save each other, they'd found a way to save themselves. The evening stretched on peacefully as they shared more stories, Tanny describing the characters she liked to draw, Kai telling her about Emma's first piano recital. Outside, the Georgia night settled in with its chorus of cicadas and distant thunder. But inside, the house felt alive with possibility, warmth, and the quiet miracle of two lonely hearts finding family in each other. The morning sun streamed through the mansion's windows as Sandra Chen, the Channel 5 news anchor, and her camera crew set up in Kai's living room. Her producer had promised a sensitive approach, but Kai still felt nervous. He adjusted his tie, watching them position lights and microphones. "Are you sure about this?" Tanny asked quietly from beside him. She wore a pretty blue dress they'd bought together, her hair neatly styled. Her fingers twisted anxiously in her lap. "Sometimes the best way to fight darkness is with light," Kai replied, giving her a reassuring smile. "Ready?" She nodded bravely, though her hands still trembled slightly. Sandra settled into a chair across from them, her professional demeanor softening as she observed their protective body language. "We'll keep this conversational," she assured them. "Just tell your story honestly." The red light blinked on, and Sandra began. 2 weeks ago, a photo went viral. Billionaire software mogul Kai Ford painting his gate with a teenage girl. Today, we're here to learn the truth behind that image. Mr. Ford, what made you decide to help Tanisha? Kai's voice was steady as he described that stormy night. "I saw someone in pain, someone who needed help. The decision wasn't complicated. It was human. You've maintained your privacy since losing your wife and daughter." Sandra noted gently. This must have been quite a change. "Isolation doesn't heal grief," Kai answered, his eyes growing distant. "Sometimes healing comes from helping others carry their burdens." Sandra turned to Tanny. "Tanisha, can you tell us what brought you to Mr. Ford's gate that night?" Tanny took a deep breath. Her voice quavered at first, but grew stronger as she spoke. "I'd been bullied my whole life about my weight. That night, some boys—" She paused, steadying herself. "They decided to teach me a lesson. They tied me to the gate, wrote cruel things on my clothes. But Mr. Ford, Kai, he didn't see a fat girl or a problem. He just saw someone who needed help." "And how has your life changed since then?" A smile brightened Tanny's face. "He showed me that I have value beyond my size, that I'm not just the girl people mock. I'm an artist, a dreamer. He gave me back my hope." The interview continued for an hour. They discussed art, healing, and the power of kindness. Kai spoke about his vision for helping other teens in crisis, his usual reserve melting as he described plans for a foundation. "The Too Fat to Marry project," he explained, "will provide safe houses and counseling for teens facing abuse and bullying, because no child should ever feel worthless." When Sandra asked about the public response to their story, Kai shared some of the hundreds of supportive messages they'd received. "People want to believe in goodness," he said. "They want to help." After the cameras stopped rolling, Sandra wiped tears from her eyes. "This story will touch a lot of hearts," she said warmly. The interview aired that evening. Within hours, social media exploded with support. The station's phone lines jammed with viewers wanting to donate. Too Fat to Marry trended nationwide, not as a cruel taunt, but as a rallying cry for change. Letters and emails poured in. "Your story gave me courage to leave my abusive home. Finally, someone is talking about weight-based bullying. How can I help? Where can I donate?" Kai's corporate office had to assign extra staff just to handle the responses. The foundation's initial funding goal was met within 24 hours. To celebrate, Tanny insisted on baking cookies. "My grandmother's recipe," she explained, pulling out mixing bowls. "The only person who ever made me feel good about myself before you." Kai watched her move confidently around his kitchen, measuring flour and sugar. The room filled with warmth and the sweet scent of vanilla. Her humming mixed with the sound of mixing bowls and timer dings. "Try this," she said, offering him a warm cookie. "Chocolate chip with a surprise inside." "Peanut butter?" he guessed, tasting it. "Grandmother's secret ingredient," she grinned, "makes everything better." They settled at the kitchen island with milk and cookies, sharing comfortable silence. Tanny's laughter bubbled up as Kai got chocolate on his tie. "You're supposed to be this sophisticated billionaire," she teased, handing him a napkin. "Clearly, I've been faking it all these years," he replied dryly, making her giggle more. The peaceful moment shattered when Kai's phone chimed with a new email. His face darkened as he read it. "What's wrong?" Tanny asked, her laughter fading. Kai turned the phone so she could see. There was a photo of a woman with hard eyes and an artificial smile, Evelyn Brooks. She held up a business card from Winston & Myers, family law specialists. The message below was brief but threatening. Time to discuss my daughter's return. Expect contact from my attorneys. Tanny's cookie fell from suddenly lifeless fingers. No, she whispered. Please, no. Kai reached across the counter and gripped her trembling hand. We'll figure this out. He promised, though his heart raced with worry. I won't let her hurt you again. The kitchen's warmth seemed to fade as they stared at the phone screen. The cookies lay forgotten as the weight of Evelyn's threat settled over them like a shadow, dimming the joy of their earlier victory. Yet beneath his fear, Kai felt a fierce determination. He'd already lost one daughter. He wouldn't lose another to cruelty and indifference. The morning sun barely touched the horizon when the first shouts echoed through Kai's security system. He was already awake, reviewing legal documents at his desk, when the alarm pinged. Through the monitor, he saw a cluster of news vans parked outside his gate, cameras and microphones thrust forward like weapons. And there at the center stood Evelyn Brooks. Her perfectly styled hair and designer outfit couldn't mask the calculation in her eyes. She played to the cameras, tears streaming down her expertly made-up face as she gestured dramatically at the mansion. "My baby!" she wailed. "That man kidnapped my precious daughter!" Kai's hands clenched into fists. From upstairs came the sound of running feet, and Tanny appeared in his study doorway, face pale with terror. "She found me," Tanny whispered, her whole body trembling. "She's going to take me back." Kai crossed the room in 3 strides, placing steady hands on her shoulders. "Listen to me carefully. You're not alone anymore. I won't let her hurt you again." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at him. The media circus outside was exactly what they'd been trying to avoid. Evelyn's voice carried through the security feed. "That billionaire used my vulnerable daughter for publicity. He corrupted her, turned her against her own mother." Tanny pressed closer to Kai, fingers gripping his sleeve. "She's lying," she choked out. "She's always lying." Kai's phone buzzed. His lawyer, Marcus Chen, was already on his way. But the damage was spreading. Local police cruisers pulled up, their lights casting red and blue shadows across the gathering crowd. "Mr. Ford," an officer's voice crackled through the intercom. "We need you to come out and address these allegations." Kai took a deep breath, squeezing Tanny's hand. "Stay close to me. Don't let her provoke you into saying anything. Let Marcus handle the legal talk." They walked together through the marble hallway, each step feeling heavier than the last. When Kai opened the front door, camera flashes exploded like lightning. Evelyn's performance reached new heights. "There she is. Tanisha, baby. Mummy's here to take you home." Tanny shrank against Kai's side, whimpering. He could feel her heart racing where their arms touched. Marcus Chen's sleek black car pulled through the crowd just then, and the lawyer emerged looking sharp and unruffled. He immediately took control, addressing the police with practiced authority. "My client has documentation of the circumstances under which Miss Brooks came into his care," Marcus stated. "There was no kidnapping, only protection of a minor in crisis." But Evelyn had come prepared. She produced papers of her own, thrust them at the officers. "I have full custody. He has no right to keep my daughter." The next hour passed in a blur of legal terms and rising voices. Marcus argued forcefully about abuse allegations and temporary guardianship, but the law was frustratingly clear. Without prior court approval, Kai had no standing to keep Tanny from her legal guardian. "The situation will require review," the senior officer explained, looking uncomfortable. "For now, the minor needs to return to her mother's custody while the courts evaluate the case." "No," Tanny sobbed, clutching Kai's arm. "Please don't make me go with her, please." Kai had faced many painful moments in his life. The death of his wife and daughter, the years of loneliness that followed. but nothing prepared him for the agony of watching two female officers gently pry Tanny's fingers from his sleeve. "It's just temporary," one assured her kindly. "Once the judge reviews everything—" But Tanny's tears flowed harder. Evelyn swooped in, wrapping possessive arms around her daughter. There, sweetie. Mommy's got you now." The look of triumph she shot Kai over Tanny's head made his blood boil. "This isn't over," he said, voice low and fierce. "I'll get you back, I promise." Tanny's tear-streaked face turned towards him as the officers guided her toward a patrol car. She tried to speak, but could only manage a broken sob. Evelyn's parting shot carried clearly across the driveway. "Stay away from my daughter, Mr. Ford. Your money can't buy everything." The media swarmed around them, shouting questions, but Kai barely heard them. He watched until the patrol car disappeared down his long driveway, Evelyn's red sports car following close behind. Marcus gripped his shoulder. "We'll file emergency motions today. I've got my whole team on this." Kai nodded mechanically, but his mind was already racing ahead to all the ways Evelyn might hurt Tanny in retaliation. The thought made him sick. The reporters lingered for hours, but Kai refused all questions. When the last news van finally pulled away, the silence felt like a physical weight. He walked through his mansion, footsteps echoing. Every room held traces of Tanny's brief stay. A sketchbook on the coffee table, a half-drunk mug of hot chocolate in the kitchen, her favorite blanket still draped over the couch. In the art studio, her unfinished painting stood on the easel, a simple scene of two figures working together at an iron gate, transforming something ugly into something beautiful. The paint was still wet in places. Kai's hands trembled as he touched the canvas. He'd grown so used to her presence, her laughter, her gentle way of pushing back the darkness that had consumed him for so long. The bar cabinet caught his eye. For years it had been his refuge when the pain grew too sharp. He pulled out a crystal tumbler, reached for the scotch, and stopped. No, he wouldn't numb himself this time. Tanny needed him clear-headed and strong. Instead, he sank to his knees beside the easel, clasping his hands together. He hadn't prayed since losing his family, but the words came naturally now. "Please," he whispered into the silence. "Please keep her safe. Help me find a way to protect her." The empty mansion offered no answer, but as Kai rose from his knees, his resolve hardened. He would fight for Tanny with everything he had. The girl who had painted hope back into his life deserved nothing less. The autumn leaves drifted past Kai's study window, unnoticed. He sat motionless at his desk, staring at yet another resignation email from his foundation's board. 3 more members had quit today, unwilling to weather the storm of accusations surrounding him. "Mr. Ford." His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Channel 5 is running another story about the situation." Kai didn't respond. He didn't need to watch to know what they were saying. The headlines had grown increasingly cruel over the past week. Billionaire's suspicious interest in teen girl. Ford Foundation under investigation. Dark past of the mansion on the hill. His phone buzzed. Marcus Chen again. The lawyer had been working tirelessly, but the legal wheels turned slowly. Too slowly for Kai's peace of mind. "The temporary custody ruling stands," Marcus reported grimly. "Brooks's lawyer is painting you as an unstable recluse with a troubled history. The judge is being cautious." Kai's fingers clenched around the phone. "And Tanny?" "She appeared on Morning Talk today with her mother. It wasn't good." With heavy steps, Kai walked to his media room and pulled up the recording. There sat Tanny, almost unrecognizable in heavy makeup and a tight dress that made her look uncomfortable. Beside her, Evelyn Brooks beamed at the camera, one manicured hand gripping her daughter's arm. "It was terrible," Evelyn was saying, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. Finding out my baby had been living with this strange man. Who knows what could have happened? The interviewer leaned forward. Tanisha, why did you go to Mr. Ford's house? Tanny's eyes stayed fixed on her lap. I was confused. Mr. Ford said he could help me become famous, said he'd make me a star. Her voice sounded wooden, rehearsed. Kai's heart cracked. He could see the terror in her slight trembling, could read the lies in her hunched shoulders. What was Evelyn doing to force these words from her? Turn it off, he commanded roughly. The screen went black. Outside his gates, another news van idled. They'd been there for days, hoping to catch him in some suspicious act. His security team had doubled, but it couldn't stop the whispers, the sideways glances from neighbors who'd known him for years. In his daughter's old art studio, Tanny's unfinished paintings still waited. Her joy had brought life back to this space. Now it felt like a tomb again. Across town, in a modest suburban house, Tanny sat alone in her small bedroom. The walls were bare. Evelyn had torn down her artwork, calling it childish garbage. Her sketchbook was hidden under her mattress, the only treasure she had left. When her mother wasn't parading her before cameras, she was locked in here. For your own protection, Evelyn claimed. But Tanny knew the truth. She was a prisoner, a prop in her mother's newest bid for attention. Late at night, when the house grew quiet, she would pull out her pencils and draw. Page after page filled with images of Kai's mansion, the peaceful gardens, the sunlit art studio. She drew Kai's kind eyes, his gentle smile, the way his whole face had lit up when she made him laugh. Tears splashed onto the paper, smudging the lines. She thought of their morning talks over breakfast, how he'd listened without judgment when she shared her pain. He'd made her feel worthy, talented, enough. Now Evelyn's cruel words filled her ears again. Too fat, too stupid, too much trouble. Another interview tomorrow, her mother announced through the door. Wear the blue dress. It makes you look less huge. And remember what to say about Ford. Or else. Tanny shuddered. The or else was clear. No food, no phone, no chance of ever seeing Kai again. On the third day of Tanny's captivity, an unexpected visitor arrived. Sister Grace Monroe stood on the Brookses' front porch, a kind face set in determined lines. I'm from Grace Chapel, she told Evelyn smoothly. We've been following your story, and I wanted to offer our congregation's support. Evelyn preened, ushering her inside. How thoughtful. Tanny and I have been through such an ordeal. Sister Grace's sharp eyes missed nothing. Not the locks on Tanny's door, not the girl's defeated posture, not the way Evelyn's smile never reached her eyes. Could I speak with Tanisha alone? She asked. As a pastoral counselor, I find young people often open up better one-on-one. Evelyn hesitated, but her desire to appear cooperative won out. Just for a few minutes. When the door closed, Sister Grace sat beside Tanny on the bed. I saw your interview with Kai Ford, she said quietly. The first one, where you spoke the truth. Tanny's head snapped up. I saw two hearts healing each other. Sister Grace continued. I saw God's love at work. What I see now. She gestured at the locked door, the bare walls. This isn't love, child. This is captivity. Tears welled in Tanny's eyes. I can't. She'll hurt me if I tell. God's truth will set you free when you speak it. Sister Grace pressed a business card into Tanny's hand. When you're ready to tell your story, your real story, call me, day or night. That evening, after another forced television appearance, Tanny lay on her bed, holding Sister Grace's card like a lifeline. On her small TV, a rerun of her first interview with Kai played. There they sat, side by side on his leather couch. His hand rested supportively on her shoulder as she spoke about finding sanctuary in his home. Their shared laughter rang true and deep when she described teaching him to use digital art tools. Sometimes, Kai had said, smiling at her, angels come in unexpected forms. Tanny touched the screen, her heart aching. In that moment, watching their genuine connection play out before her eyes, she knew what she had to do. The truth couldn't stay buried any longer. She pulled out her secret phone, the one Kai had given her for emergencies, the one Evelyn hadn't found. With trembling fingers, she dialed Sister Grace's number. "I'm ready," she whispered when the pastor answered. "I want to tell everything, the real story, about Mum, about Kai, all of it." Sister Grace's voice was warm and steady. "God bless you, child. The truth is waiting to be heard." Tanny glanced at her latest sketch. The mansion's gates? No. Longer bearing cruel words, but standing open, welcoming. Maybe, just maybe, she would find her way back through them soon. The morning light filtered through the curtains of the green room at WXTV Studios. Tanny sat quietly while a makeup artist dabbed powder on her face, trying to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Her mother paced nearby, rehearsing their story one more time. "Remember," Evelyn hissed, checking her reflection in a mirror. "Ford manipulated you. He isolated you. He's the villain here." Tanny's stomach churned. The lies felt like poison on her tongue. She fingered Sister Grace's card in her pocket, remembering their late-night conversation. The truth was a seed planted in her heart, growing stronger by the minute. "5 minutes to air," called a production assistant. Evelyn smoothed her designer dress. "This is our moment, sweetie. Don't mess it up." The set of Morning Light with Linda Chen buzzed with activity. Hot lights beamed down as Linda, America's favorite daytime host, welcomed her audience. Today we have an exclusive interview with Evelyn Brooks and her daughter Tanisha at the center of the controversial Kai Ford mansion story. Cameras rolled as Tanny and her mother took their seats on the plush interview couch. Linda leaned forward, perfectly coiffed and sympathetic. "Tanisha, you've been through quite an ordeal. Tell us what really happened at the Ford mansion." Tanny felt her mother's hand squeeze her arm, a warning, but something inside her shifted, like a key turning in a lock. She thought of Kai's kindness, his patience, the way he'd given her back her dignity. What really happened? Tanny's voice trembled. "The truth is different from what you've heard." Evelyn's grip tightened. "Sweetie, remember how he—" "No, Mum." Tanny pulled away, straightening her spine. "I'm done remembering lies." She turned to face the camera directly, Sister Grace's words echoing in her mind. "God's truth will set you free. 3 weeks ago, I was tied to Kai Ford's gate in the middle of a storm. But Mr. Ford didn't put me there. I ran away from home because—" Her voice cracked. "Because I couldn't take the abuse anymore." The studio fell silent. Linda Chen leaned forward, all pretense of casual interviewing gone. "What kind of abuse, Tanisha?" "My mother." Tanny's eyes welled with tears, but her voice grew stronger. "She called me worthless, fat, disgusting, said no one would ever love me. Her boyfriend wrote those cruel words on my hoodie and tied me to the gate as punishment for eating a sandwich without permission." Evelyn jumped up. "She's lying. This isn't what we—" "Security." Linda signaled quietly. 2 producers appeared, gently but firmly escorting a protesting Evelyn off stage. "Go on, Tanisha," Linda encouraged softly. "Kai Ford didn't kidnap me. He saved me. He cut me free from those gates and gave me shelter. He listened to me, believed in me." Tanny wiped her eyes. "In his house, for the first time in my life, I felt safe, valued. He treated me like a daughter, not a burden." The audience was sniffling now. Linda handed Tanny a tissue. He taught me to use digital art tools. We cooked breakfast together. He laughed at my jokes and hung my drawings on his refrigerator. She smiled through her tears. He showed me what a real parent's love feels like. But your mother claims, my mother lies, Tanny said firmly. She's always lied. She's using me for attention, for money, for revenge against a good man who only wanted to help a scared girl in the rain. Linda turned to address the camera. We're receiving word that this interview is now trending nationwide. Miles away, in his silent mansion, Kai Ford sat motionless before his television. Tears streamed down his weathered face as he watched Tanny speak her truth. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, which was already buzzing. Ford, he answered hoarsely. It's over, his lawyer announced. The DA is dropping all charges. The evidence from the interview, plus Sister Grace's testimony about the conditions at the Brooks house, it's done. You're clear. Kai's legs gave out. He sank to his knees, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. Thank you, God, he whispered, the words feeling strange but right on his lips. Thank you for setting her free. Back in the studio, Tanny was still speaking, her voice growing stronger with each word. To every person out there who's been told they're too much or not enough, you deserve love, you deserve safety, you deserve to be heard. She touched the silver cross at her neck. And to Kai Ford, if you're watching, thank you for showing me that family isn't about blood, it's about love. The studio erupted in applause. Social media exploded with support. Tanny's truth and Chaung Kai Ford's heart became instant trending topics. Linda Chen dabbed her own eyes. Tanisha Brooks, thank you for your courage today. Is there anything else you'd like to say? Tanny looked directly into the camera, imagining Kai on the other side. Just that sometimes, when you think God has forgotten you, he sends an angel. Mine came in the form of a quiet man with kind eyes who opened his gate on a stormy night. As the show cut to commercial, phones across the country lit up with messages of support. Donations poured into the Too Fat to Marry project. Sister Grace's church organized a prayer vigil. And in his mansion, Kai Ford stood at his window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in colors of hope. The gates that had once been symbols of his isolation now stood as testament to love's power to heal and transform. His phone buzzed again, a text from Tanny. Coming home soon? For the first time in years, Kai felt truly awake, truly alive. He typed back 3 simple words. The gates open. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the iron gates of Kai Ford's mansion. Behind those gates, a man who had locked himself away from the world for years now stood watching, his heart thundering in his chest. Through the security monitor, he could see them approaching, Tanny looking smaller than he remembered, and Sister Grace Monroe, her steady presence like an anchor beside the girl. Kai's fingers trembled as he pressed the control panel. The gates that had once symbolized his isolation began to open, this time welcoming rather than defending. He couldn't wait for them to fully part. His feet were already moving, carrying him down the driveway at a pace that surprised even him. Tanny! His voice cracked with emotion as he ran toward her. She broke into a run too, leaving Sister Grace smiling behind her. When they met, Tanny crashed into his arms with such force it nearly knocked him over. She was shaking, but her smile was radiant through her tears. I told them everything. She whispered into his shirt, her voice muffled but clear. I told them the truth. Kai held her tighter, one hand protectively cradling her head. You were brave, he said simply, those 3 words carrying the weight of everything he couldn't express. Sister Grace approached them slowly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The Lord works in mysterious ways, she said softly. Sometimes he uses storms to bring people together. They walked back to the mansion together, their footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. Kai noticed Tanny taking everything in, as if seeing it all for the first time again. When they reached the front door, she paused. "Is it really okay?" she asked uncertainly. "For me to come back?" Kai squeezed her shoulder. "This is your home too, Tanny. It always will be." Inside, the mansion showed signs of Kai's recent isolation. A fine layer of dust covered the furniture, and the air felt slightly stale. But Tanny's artwork still adorned the walls. Her sketches, her paintings, her heart displayed in every corner. "You kept them all up?" she said, touching one of her drawings gently. "Of course I did." Kai's voice was gruff with emotion. They brought life back to this place. In the kitchen, Kai moved with purpose, pulling out pans and ingredients. "Breakfast?" he asked, already knowing the answer. It had become their ritual, their way of starting each day together. "Can I help?" Tanny asked, already rolling up her sleeves. Soon the kitchen filled with the sounds and smells of their shared cooking. Eggs sizzling, toast popping up, coffee brewing. Sister Grace sat at the counter, watching them move around each other with the easy familiarity of family. "You two sure know how to make a mean breakfast," she commented, accepting a steaming mug of coffee from Kai. They ate together at the kitchen island, laughing and talking as if the painful separation had never happened. Tanny told stories about the kind messages she'd received after the interview, and Kai shared how the Too Fat to Marry project had received an outpouring of support. After breakfast, Sister Grace pulled out a thick folder from her bag. "Now," she said, her tone becoming more businesslike, "let's talk about making this official." They spread the emancipation paperwork across the kitchen counter. Sister Grace explained each document carefully, her years of experience with troubled youth evident in her clear explanations. "It won't be easy," she warned, "but with the evidence we have, plus the public support and Tanny's age, we have a strong case." Kai leaned forward, his expression determined. "I want to apply to be her foster parent once the emancipation is approved," he said firmly. "I've already contacted my lawyers about it." Tanny's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Really?" "Really," Kai confirmed, meeting her gaze. "If you want that, of course." Tanny's answer was to throw her arms around him again, nearly knocking over her orange juice in the process. Sister Grace smiled, making a note in her folder. "I'll help with that process too. My church has connections with several family court judges who understand complicated situations like this." As the afternoon wore on, they moved to the art studio. The room that had once been Gracie's sanctuary, then Tanny's refuge, now needed renewal. Kai brought in cans of paint, bright yellows and blues that made Tanny's eyes light up. "These colors," she said, running her fingers over the cans. "They're the colors of new beginnings," Kai said softly. "I thought maybe it was time to brighten things up in here." They worked together, rolling fresh paint over the old walls. Sister Grace had left by then, promising to return tomorrow with more paperwork and resources. The fresh colors transformed the space, making it feel alive and new. As they painted, they talked about everything and nothing, their hopes for the future, their fears, their dreams. Tanny shared ideas for new artwork she wanted to create, and Kai listened, offering suggestions and encouragement. "You know," Tanny said, carefully edging around a window frame, "when I was staying with my mom these past few days, I couldn't stop drawing this place. It felt more like home than anywhere else ever has." Kai paused in his painting, looking at her with deep understanding. "When you were gone, this place felt empty again. Not just quiet. Empty." He dipped his roller in more paint. "I never want it to feel that way again." They worked until the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the studio windows. The walls now glowed with hope and possibility, the bright colors reflecting their shared future. Paint splattered their clothes and dotted their faces, but neither cared. Standing back to admire their work, Tanny leaned against Kai's side. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, both of them taking in the transformed space. "Welcome home, Tanny," he said softly. She smiled, reaching up to wipe a spot of yellow paint from his cheek. "It's good to be home, Dad," she replied, testing the word carefully. Kai's heart swelled at the title, and he pulled her closer, knowing that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as storms, and the strongest families are the ones we choose. Time flowed like gentle water at the mansion, washing away the bitter memories of separation and scandal. Each passing week brought new signs of healing, not just for Kai and Tanny, but for countless others touched by their story. In Kai's home office, stacks of letters arrived daily. He sat at his desk one morning, reading through them with misty eyes. Teenagers from across the country poured out their hearts, sharing stories of bullying, self-doubt, and newfound hope. "Listen to this one," he called to Tanny, who was sketching by the window. "Your story showed me I'm not alone. I've been bullied about my weight for years, but watching you stand up and tell the truth gave me courage. Today I told my parents about the bullying. They're helping me now. Thank you for being brave." Tanny looked up from her drawing pad, her eyes shining. "That's the third letter like that this week." The Too Fat to Marry Foundation's relaunch exceeded all expectations. Donations flowed in from corporations and individuals alike. Kai hired a dedicated team to manage the foundation's growing initiatives, support groups, art therapy programs, and anti-bullying campaigns in schools. The media narrative had shifted dramatically. Where once there were accusations and suspicion, now there were stories of redemption and hope. Reporters sought Kai out not to discuss his billions or business empire, but to explore deeper themes of healing and faith. During one particularly touching interview, Kai spoke openly about his journey. "Money can't heal a broken heart," he said, his voice steady but emotional. "It took a scared, brave girl showing up at my gate to teach me that. Sometimes God sends angels in unexpected packages." The mansion itself transformed alongside its residents. The once quiet halls now buzzed with energy as Tanny's online art therapy classes attracted local youth. The studio became a sanctuary for creative expression, its walls covered in artwork that spoke of pain and triumph. Tanny thrived in her role as mentor. Her natural empathy, combined with her artistic talent, helped other teenagers open up about their struggles. She set up easels in the garden, teaching small groups how to channel their emotions through color and form. "Everyone has a story to tell," she often said to her students, "and every story deserves to be heard." Kai would sometimes pause in doorways, watching these sessions with quiet pride. The sight of young people finding their voice through art reminded him of Gracie, but the pain of remembering had softened into something sweeter. One particularly beautiful Sunday morning, Kai adjusted his tie in the mirror while Tanny waited downstairs. They had started attending Sister Grace's church regularly, finding comfort in the community's warmth and acceptance. The small church welcomed them without fanfare or fuss. Sister Grace had made it clear from the start. Within these walls, Kai wasn't a billionaire, and Tanny wasn't a media sensation. They were simply family, coming to worship. During that morning's service, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Sister Grace's sermon focused on divine timing and second chances. "Sometimes," she preached, her voice carrying to every corner, "our greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest challenges. God doesn't waste our pain, He transforms it into purpose." Kai sat in the pew, Tanny beside him, letting the words wash over him. As the congregation bowed their heads in prayer, something shifted deep within his soul. The heavy weight of guilt he'd carried for so long began to lift, replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Tanny reached over and squeezed his hand during the prayer, a gesture so simple yet profound. Kai squeezed back, remembering all the empty Sundays when he'd sat alone in his mansion, drowning in grief. Now, here he was, part of something bigger than himself again. After the service, they joined other families for coffee and donuts in the church hall. Tanny chatted easily with other teenagers, while Kai found himself in conversation with parents who shared similar stories of redemption and restoration. Sister Grace approached them as they prepared to leave. "You two are good for each other," she said, her eyes twinkling. "God knew exactly what he was doing when he brought you together." On the drive home, Tanny worked on a sketch in her notebook. "What are you drawing?" Kai asked, glancing over at a stoplight. She turned the page toward him. It was a simple but powerful drawing of two hands clasped in prayer, light radiating from their joined fingers. "It's us," she said softly. "Not just me and you, but everyone who's been touched by our story. We're all connected now." Back at the mansion, they found more letters waiting. Tanny sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting them into categories: stories needing immediate response, potential foundation projects, and messages of encouragement. "Dad," she called out, still getting used to using the word, "listen to this one. A girl in Texas started a Too Fat to Marry art club at her school. They're using creativity to fight bullying." Kai paused by her side, resting a hand on her shoulder. "You started all this, you know. Your courage that night at the gate. It's creating ripples we may never fully see." The afternoon sun painted long shadows across the floor as they worked together, reading letters, planning foundation initiatives, and sharing quiet moments of gratitude. The mansion, once a monument to loss and isolation, had become a beacon of hope for others walking through their own storms. As evening approached, they sat on the back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. The same colors now adorned the walls of their art studio, symbols of new beginnings and second chances. "I never thought I'd have a family again," Kai said quietly, breaking their comfortable silence. Tanny looked up from her sketchbook. "God had other plans," she replied with a smile. "Better ones than either of us could have imagined." The words hung in the warm evening air, a testament to the healing power of love, faith, and the courage to begin again. From the ashes of their separate sorrows, God had indeed built something beautiful, a family bound not by blood, but by choice, understanding, and grace. The autumn evening sparkled with possibility as hundreds of tiny lights transformed Kai's mansion into a fairy tale castle. The Foundation's first annual gala drew people from across the country, survivors, supporters, and those ready to join the fight against body shaming and abuse. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over elegantly dressed guests mingling in the grand foyer. Tanny, wearing a flowing emerald dress that made her eyes shine, moved through the crowd with newfound grace. Gone was the terrified girl from the gate. In her place stood a young woman who had found her voice and purpose. "It's almost time," she whispered to Kai, squeezing his hand. He nodded, adjusting his bow tie nervously. The past few months had been a whirlwind of preparation, but this moment felt particularly significant. The crowd gathered in the ballroom, where a massive canvas stood covered in silk. This was Tanny's surprise. A collaborative mural created by dozens of teenagers who had found healing through the Foundation's art therapy programs. Sister Grace, resplendent in purple, stepped forward to offer a blessing. "Lord, let this work of art serve as a testament to your healing power and the strength you give to those who trust in you." Tanny's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the silk covering. With a deep breath, She pulled it away, revealing the mural in all its glory. Gasps of appreciation filled the room. The painting depicted an ornate iron gate, but unlike the one where Tanny's story began, this gate was bursting open with explosions of color. Butterflies emerged from between the bars, their wings carrying messages of hope. Flowers grew through the metalwork, transforming cold iron into a garden of possibility. And written in golden letters across the top were the words, "You are enough." Applause thundered through the ballroom. Many wiped tears from their eyes, recognizing their own journeys in the symbolic imagery. Each teen artist had contributed their own story to the piece, creating a powerful testament to survival and transformation. Kai stepped onto the stage, his heart full as he surveyed the crowd. The microphone felt heavy in his hands as he began to speak. "A year ago, I was a different man," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I lived behind my own gates, trapped by grief and guilt." He paused, gathering himself. "Then one stormy night, God sent an angel to my gate, though she was a very wet and frightened angel at the time." Gentle laughter rippled through the audience. Tanny smiled, remembering. "Sometimes," Kai continued, "the ones we rescue are the ones who save us." Tanny didn't just need shelter that night, she needed someone to see her true worth. And in helping her find that worth, I rediscovered my own. Tanny joined him on stage, her presence steady and strong beside him. The foundation had already helped hundreds of teenagers find their voice through art and advocacy. But this was just the beginning. After the speeches and presentations, while the guests enjoyed dessert and dancing, Kai and Tanny slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The autumn air carried the sweet scent of late-blooming jasmine, and fireflies danced across the perfectly manicured lawn like earthbound stars. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the magical display. Through the windows behind them, laughter and music spilled out into the night, making the darkness feel less dark. "We did it," Tanny said softly, her voice full of wonder. Kai looked at her, this brave young woman who had helped him find his way back to faith and purpose. "No," he answered softly, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "God did." They stayed there a moment longer, father and daughter by choice rather than blood, their bond now unbreakable. The mansion that had once echoed with loneliness now overflowed with purpose and joy, a testament to divine restoration. The fireflies continued their dance, little lights against the darkness, much like the hope their foundation now offered to others trapped behind their own gates of shame and fear. Dawn painted the Georgia sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold, casting long shadows across the mansion's manicured grounds. The morning after the gala, a peaceful quiet had settled over the estate, so different from the stormy night that had brought Tanny to these gates months ago. Dew sparkled on the freshly trimmed grass as Tanny made her way down the curved driveway, her arms loaded with painting supplies. She wore her favorite oversized sweater, one of Kai's old ones, rolled up at the sleeves to keep them clean. The morning air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of autumn. The black iron gate stood before her, recently repainted to cover years of wear. She set down her supplies carefully, pulling out a brush and examining its bristles. This message had been growing in her heart for months, waiting for the right moment. After last night's celebration, she knew the time had finally come. Tanny dipped her brush in the pristine white paint, her hand steady as she began forming the first letter. The surface was cool beneath her fingers as she worked, each stroke deliberate and careful. She thought about all the teens who had shared their stories at the gala, about how many of them had felt exactly as she once did. Too big, too much, too different to be loved. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her smile. She didn't need to turn around to know it was Kai. His presence had become as familiar as her own reflection. He approached quietly, watching her work with pride shining in his eyes. "You're up early," he said softly, careful not to break her concentration. "Couldn't sleep." Tanny replied, adding a graceful curve to the letter I. "After last night, I just kept thinking about that first night here, how different everything was." Kai moved closer, placing his hand on the cool metal beside hers. The morning sun caught the silver in his hair, reminding Tanny of how much younger he looked these days, how much lighter. The weight of grief he'd carried for so long had eased, replaced by something brighter. Together they watched as the message took shape. "You are enough." The white paint gleamed against the black bars, transforming what had once been a barrier into a beacon. Each letter flowed into the next, creating a message that seemed to dance across the gate. Tanny stepped back to examine her work, tilting her head critically. The official paperwork declaring her emancipation and Kai's status as her foster father sat safely in his study. But this felt like signing her name on her new life in her own way. "What do you think?" she asked, wiping a smudge of paint from her cheek. Kai studied the gate, emotion making his voice rough. "It's perfect, from shame to grace, just like you." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the paint dry in the morning light. A jogger passed by, slowing to read the message. She smiled and waved, continuing on her way. Already their gate was touching lives. "You know," Tanny said thoughtfully, "I used to think that gate was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Being tied there, humiliated." She took a deep breath. "But now I realize it was actually the best thing, because you opened the gate that night." Kai turned to her, his eyes glistening. He shook his head slowly, his voice thick with emotion. "No, sweetheart, you opened my heart." Tanny stepped into his embrace, paint-stained hands and all. They held each other tightly, this unlikely father and daughter brought together by divine orchestration. Through the bars of the gate, sunlight streamed around them, casting their shadows as one. The mansion rose behind them, no longer a mausoleum of grief, but a home filled with purpose and love. The studio upstairs hummed with creative energy from their foundation's art programs. The kitchen held memories of shared meals and laughter. Every room echoed with the sound of healing. Around them, the world continued its morning routine, cars passing, birds singing, life moving forward. But here, at this gate, something profound had transformed. The hateful words that once marked Tanny as unwanted had become a message of hope for everyone who passed by. They finally stepped apart, both wiping tears from their eyes. Tanny gathered her painting supplies while Kai collected the empty paint cans. Together they walked back toward the house, leaving their message to dry in the morning sun. The gate stood proud behind them, its bars no longer a prison but a canvas, declaring truth to all who passed. You are enough. Their footsteps crunched on the gravel driveway as they made their way home. Father and daughter, both once broken but now whole, a living testament to the power of love, faith, and second chances. The world that had once watched their story unfold through suspicious eyes now faded away, leaving them to their peace. The camera of public scrutiny dimmed, but the light of their truth continued to shine, not just through the foundation or the art programs, but through two hearts that had found healing in helping each other. Thank you for being here. If something in this story stayed with you, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow I'll bring you another story crafted with heart.